I recognized the woman sitting in the leasing office before she even turned around. She used to sit across from me at my dinner table. She was wearing a pale pink pantsuit, the kind young women think makes them look powerful. I suppose it worked on some people. On me, it only reminded me how carefully she used to sit at my kitchen table, sipping coffee and pretending she didn't notice the family she'd stepped into. Samantha, now 30-something, with a pearl earring catching the light. My ex-husband's new wife. She glanced up when the office assistant said, "Mrs. McKinnon?" And for the briefest second, her smile faltered, only for a heartbeat. Then she was all charm again, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeve and standing to greet me as if we were two polite women who'd never had a history. "I didn't know you were looking at this unit," she said lightly, like we were at a bake sale and both reached for the same pie. I looked at her, then at the leasing agent, a young man in his 20s who looked more nervous than he should have. "I have an appointment for the two-bedroom on the third floor, the one with the balcony." Samantha's smile widened. "Oh, that one." "Gerald just signed for it yesterday. It's already off the market." For a moment I said nothing, just stood there, my purse hanging at my side, still zipped, my appointment confirmation still in my phone. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips, in the corners of my mouth. But I smiled, softly, the way you do when someone brings a knife to a handshake. "I see," I said. Then, to the leasing agent, "Is that true?" He cleared his throat, flipping nervously through a folder. Yes, ma'am. It looks like, yes. Mr. McKinnon signed yesterday morning. We tried to call. Maybe it didn't go through." "It didn't," I said. My voice was calm. That always scares people more. "And that man is my ex-husband. Did he mention that part?" Samantha gave a light laugh. "Lorraine, honestly, let's not make this awkward." She always used my name like it belonged in her mouth, like she had a right to it. I turned to leave without another word. But as I reached the door, she said, "If you're still looking for a place, Gerald might be open to helping. He didn't realize you were interested in this one." I turned back, slowly. "Tell Gerald I'm not in the habit of taking hand-me-downs." The drive home felt longer than it was. My little bungalow sat quietly at the end of Walnut Street, a low roof and peeling paint, with the kind of quiet no one respects until it's gone. I parked in the same spot I had for 27 years and sat there for a while, keys still in the ignition. I thought about the last 2 years, about the divorce that wasn't so much ugly as it was invisible. Gerald had simply drifted. Quiet dinners turned into separate rooms. The man I married at 28 was now in a tailored life with a woman half my age and an appetite for designer lamps and gym memberships. I stepped inside. The house was too clean, not from care, but from habit. I kept it like a museum, like I was afraid to touch anything that might break the last few years into pieces I couldn't glue back together. The worst part? I hadn't even told anyone about the move. I wanted it to be mine, just mine. A little two-bedroom with sunlight in the morning and no memories in the closets. My son knew nothing. He hadn't called in weeks anyway. And why would he? He had a new family now, too. Gerald and Samantha had made sure of that. The kettle on the stove was still warm from this morning. I poured myself a cup of weak tea, sat at the table, and stared at the closed blinds. She looked so comfortable in that office, so certain, as if taking my apartment was just another casual step forward. I'd like to say I wasn't angry, that it didn't matter, that I'd grown beyond petty emotions. But the truth is, I was angry. Not at her. Not even at Gerald. At myself. for thinking I could start something new without someone trying to take it. But that would be the last time anyone took something from me without asking. Not again. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying or pacing or indulging in melodrama. No, I just sat. In my robe, with a cup of now cold tea, watching the shadows change on the living room walls. Grief doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it just sits beside you like an old acquaintance, reminding you that you were never really alone, just forgotten. By morning, I had made a list. I do that when things start to feel slippery. The kind of list that doesn't go on a fridge but lives in your chest. Item 1, call the bank. Item 2, find a lawyer. A good one. Not polite, not affordable. A smart one. Item 3, pull the deed. Reread everything. Check every signature. The sun hadn't even climbed over the maple tree in my front yard when I was on the phone with the bank. I asked to speak with a manager, not because I like titles, but because the first voice that answered sounded young and unbothered. I've learned over the years that when you're a 64-year-old woman asking about financial documents, you'll be treated like a toddler unless you sound like you have a courtroom behind you. The manager, to his credit, was efficient. Yes, Mrs. McKinnon, you're still listed as the primary on the Maple Street property, sole ownership. Any recent activity on the account tied to it? A pause. Clicks of a keyboard. Only a few inquiries, nothing authorized, no transfers. What kind of inquiries? Real estate valuation requests, a couple soft credit pulls from a property group. Do you want me to email the details? Yes, I said, and flagged the account. No permissions without written consent from me. No exceptions. Understood. I hung up, folded the phone in my lap, and stared at the framed photo of my parents on the mantel. My mother used to say, "A woman who owns land owns silence, because no one talks over the one holding the paper." I never understood that fully until now. By 10 a.m., I was seated across from a woman named Ruth Hayward, an attorney recommended by a friend from church. Ruth wore glasses on a chain and spoke with the clipped certainty of someone who didn't tolerate flattery or excuses. I liked her immediately. "Tell me everything," she said, not even offering a polite smile. I did. From the leasing office to Samantha's remark about Gerald helping me find a place. I told her about the sudden interest in a unit I'd only mentioned to the leasing office 2 days prior. Ruth took notes with a black fountain pen, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. "Your ex-husband wouldn't be the first to try something cute with property," she said finally. "You're sure he doesn't have access to your accounts?" "He shouldn't, but I trusted him longer than I should have, and that makes me unsure." She tapped her pen. "We'll run a full check. Titles, transfer history, liens. If anything changed hands, even paperwork you were tricked into signing, we'll find it." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you." "Lorraine," she said, looking up at me with a directness I hadn't seen in years, "you're not the first woman I've met who thought dignity meant staying quiet. You're just one of the rare ones who came in before it was too late." I went home and found the old fireproof box in my hall closet, the one Gerald always joked about, called it my doomsday drawer. Ironic. Inside were documents dating back 25 years, the house purchase, insurance papers, tax returns, even the first checks I wrote from our joint account after he left. Some of them still had my handwriting, slanted and patient. I used to think those pages were about survival. Now I saw them as evidence. I spread them out on the dining table and made another list. I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. I'd built a home, raised a son, paid my taxes, smiled when I wasn't happy, listened when no one asked how I felt, and cooked meals for people who never cleaned the table. And now, they thought they could erase me from the page? Let them try. There are moments in a woman's life when the world tilts, not with drama, not with spectacle, but with a quiet finality, like a door that shuts without slamming. That's how it felt, sitting at my own dining table, surrounded by 25 years of documents and receipts, and realizing I had spent a lifetime treating my life as something temporary. Not anymore. I made copies, the kind that go into thick manila folders and fireproof envelopes. Originals stayed home. The rest I packed into a tote bag with a broken zipper. The one Gerald once said made me look disorganized. That alone made me want to carry it. I had one more stop before meeting Ruth again. The assessor's office was down on Main, sandwiched between a pet grooming place and a shuttered antique shop. The woman behind the counter had large glasses and a nameplate that read, Tanya. I need to pull the full history of the Maple Street property, I said. Every reassessment, valuation, tax lien, owner inquiry, the full chain. Tanya looked up, eyes narrowing just slightly. Are you the owner? Yes, I said, handing over my ID, and the only one who ever paid a cent on it. She didn't ask more, just typed. Then printed out 11 pages of fine print, stapled at the corner. I thanked her, folded it carefully, and walked out into the October wind, feeling something I hadn't in years. Weight. The kind of weight that comes with knowing things. Ruth skimmed the documents with quick, efficient eyes. Smart to get this now, she murmured. Someone's been poking around. She pointed to a valuation request from 3 months ago, submitted under a holding company name I didn't recognize, but the address matched Gerald's business registration. Trying to gauge the worth, she said. Likely prepping to make you an offer. Or worse, contest your ownership. He wouldn't dare, I said. But we both knew he might. Men like Gerald rarely start with confrontation. They start with confusion, fogging the mirror, hoping you'll second-guess your reflection. Ruth leaned back in her chair. I'd recommend putting a quiet lien on the property, not public, just a restriction notice. That way, if anyone tries to transfer it behind your back, title company flags it. Do it, I said. She nodded and scribbled something on her legal pad. Also, she added, you mentioned wanting to change your will? I did. I'd been putting it off for years, partly out of laziness, partly out of the hope that my son might one day act like I mattered beyond my bank account. But now? I want everything placed in a trust, I said. For my granddaughter, Maggie. She's the only one who's ever loved me without expecting anything in return. Ruth smiled faintly, spoken like a woman who's finally ready to stop bleeding slowly. Back home, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched since Gerald left. Old letters, dried-out pens, and a note Maggie had written me when she was 9. Grandma, when I'm big, I'll buy you a blue house with cake every day. I sat with that note in my hand for a long time. She was 21 now, in college, working part-time in a bookstore, and still remembered my birthday, even when her father forgot. That night, I cooked dinner for one. I set the table, lit a candle, and poured a glass of wine I'd been saving for an occasion. This felt like one. Not because I'd won anything, but because I'd finally started playing. They wanted me quiet. Gone. Neatly shuffled off into a smaller life, a smaller room, a smaller presence. I took a bite of roasted chicken and smiled. Let them wonder what I'm planning. My son called the next morning. I stared at the screen a moment too long before answering. "Ethan," I said, steady, almost cheerful. "Mom," he said, his voice thin. "Hi, I was just checking in." He never checked in. Ethan wasn't cruel, just distant, too busy, too managed. He called on holidays and when paperwork needed a signature. This call wasn't accidental. "What's wrong?" I asked. A pause. "I heard you were at the leasing office yesterday." "So that's where we're starting." "I was. Had an appointment." "You didn't tell me you were looking for a place." "I didn't think I had to," I said. Another pause. Then, lighter. "Well, Dad said it surprised him too. Thought maybe there'd been some confusion. You know the place is spoken for, right?" Spoken for. Like a slice of cake on a paper plate. "I figured that out when I saw Samantha sitting in the chair I was supposed to be in." He chuckled. Awkward. "Yeah, that was, it wasn't intentional. I think Dad didn't realize—" "Ethan," I interrupted gently. "Don't explain for him. He's got a voice." Silence. I heard muffled background noise. Maybe the clink of a coffee cup, a door opening. I imagined him pacing in his office, trying to make this call before a meeting, treating it like one more item on his to-do list. "Are you okay?" he asked finally. It sounded like an afterthought, like someone asking a stranger on a plane if they want the window closed. "I'm fine," I said. He hesitated. "Dad says he could help you find another place, if you want. He knows a guy." I laughed. It surprised both of us. "No, thank you," I said. "Tell him I'm not looking for his charity or his pity." "That's not what this is," he said, but his voice didn't have much conviction. "Isn't it?" He sighed. "You've always been independent, Mom. It's not a bad thing." "Independent," I repeated. "You make it sound like a character flaw." "No," he said quickly. Just, Dad and I both want to make sure you're taken care of." There it was. Taken care of. "Ethan," I said quietly, "I've been taking care of myself for over 40 years. Paid off 2 mortgages, ran a business, buried my parents and my marriage, and never once asked you or your father to lift a finger. Now he buys up the place I want to live and sends his wife to sit in my seat. That's not concern. That's control." The silence this time was heavier. "Mom," he said finally, "I didn't know. I swear." I believed him. I just didn't care. "Anyway," he continued, "Maggie mentioned she wants to come visit next week. Said you two had a date for lunch?" "We do." "She thinks the world of you, you know." I felt something flicker in my chest. "I know," I said. "Well, just let us know if you need anything." I didn't answer. "Okay," he said, when I stayed silent. "I'll let you go." And then the line went dead. I set the phone down and walked out to the back porch. The garden looked tired. October always made it sag. But the light was clean, real, the kind of light you don't appreciate until you've been sitting too long under someone else's shadow. I thought about Ethan's voice. Calm, placating, hollow. He didn't mean harm. That's what made it worse. He didn't mean anything at all. And I thought about Samantha, with her pink suit and practiced smile. I wondered how many rooms she'd walked into, wearing my life like a borrowed coat. Let her have it. I wasn't interested in chasing what had already been claimed by people who didn't deserve it. I was interested in one thing now, not being erased, and that started with reminding them I still held the pen. Samantha showed up at my door the next day. No call, no warning. Just the sound of her high heels clicking on the front porch, followed by the soft ding of the doorbell. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing there, sunglasses on top of her head, holding a sleek leather folder under one arm like she was here to sell me insurance. For a brief moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home. But I'm not made that way. I opened the door and waited. "Lorraine," she said with that smile, polished and too white for someone who'd never worked a day with her hands. "Do you have a minute?" I didn't answer, just stepped aside. She walked in like she'd done it before, like she still belonged. "Still smells like lavender in here," she said, glancing around. "You always did keep a tidy home." I said nothing. She stood near the edge of the living room, careful not to sit. Maybe she thought it gave her the upper hand. Or maybe she just didn't want to wrinkle her blouse. "I thought we should talk," she said. I nodded slowly. "That's not why you're here." Her smile tightened. She pulled a folded piece of paper from the folder and held it out. I didn't take it. "It's an offer," she said, "from Gerald, for the house." I stared at her. "Gerald wants to buy this house? He thinks it would be a good way to simplify things." I laughed, quietly. The kind of laugh that comes when a mask slips. "Simplify," I repeated. "Yes. You've been saying for years that this place is too much to manage. You said you wanted something smaller, and you already tried to move once. Gerald's just trying to help. To help me sell him the house I built my life in?" "Lorraine, don't Lorraine me," I said. She stopped. Finally. The words had weight now. I walked to the side table and picked up a framed photo. Ethan, at age 6, sitting on Gerald's shoulders in this very backyard. The grass was too long in the photo, the fence half painted. But we were a family then, whatever that meant. "You've sat at my table," I said, still looking at the photo. "You've eaten the food I cooked, smiled at my son, toasted with my wine. And now you come into my house with a piece of paper and tell me you're doing me a favor. It's a generous offer. It's a grave." She blinked. "You're not offering me a way forward," I continued. "You're trying to bury me politely. You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being clear." I finally took the paper, unfolded it, and skimmed it. The number was large, larger than I expected. Maybe they thought I'd be flattered into obedience, but I knew the market. I knew the house, and I knew Gerald. "Why now?" I asked. She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "You think I'm planning something. That's why he sent you." Her face didn't change, but her eyes did. A flicker of something, surprise or fear, or worse, recognition. "I don't need this house," I said. "I want it. There's a difference. This is where I stood when I found out I was pregnant, where I held my mother's hand as she died, where I cooked for a man who forgot how to say thank you. And now you want me to give it up because you two want the zip code." She opened her mouth, closed it again. I folded the offer and handed it back. "You can go now." Samantha hesitated, but eventually nodded. She turned to leave, her heels clicking against the floor again. As she reached the door, she paused. "He really did mean it kindly." "I'm sure he did," I said. "Tell him I appreciate the offer, and that if he wants to discuss my home again, he's welcome to come himself." She opened the door. "Oh," I added. "Next time, knock first. I don't answer surprise visits from women carrying weapons in manila folders." She left without another word. I stood there for a moment, watching the empty doorway, then closed the door and locked it. It wasn't about money. It never was. It was about removing me. Softly, quietly, without conflict. They'd tried the polite way. Now we'd see what happened when the polite version failed. That evening, I brought the offer letter to Ruth. She read it twice, then once more, this time aloud, pausing occasionally to scoff under her breath. "They think you're tired," she said flatly. "That's their entire strategy." "I am tired," I replied, "but not of the house." She nodded, setting the paper aside. "Well, it's clean. Legally. They didn't lowball you, technically speaking. But the language, it's careful. Too careful. See this part?" She pointed to a clause about streamlining estate management and avoiding complications for family members in the future. They're trying to anchor the sale in some sense of duty, not to you, but to your legacy. They want to sound like they're doing you a favor by simplifying your death. I exhaled through my nose. They're always so considerate. Ruth leaned forward. "You want me to draft a response?" I shook my head. "No paper, no emails, no trail. If Gerald wants to talk to me, he can knock on my door. I'm not giving him the dignity of a formal rejection." She smiled. "You sure you've never practiced law?" "Just motherhood." She sat back. "All right then." Let them sweat. Back home, I lit a fire in the living room for the first time in months. I pulled the old wool throw over my lap and stared into the flames. Not thinking, just watching. The house creaked in the way old houses do. Familiar sounds, the pop of settling wood, the gentle hum of the fridge. Everything in its place. Nothing threatened. Not yet. But I didn't trust stillness anymore. The next morning, I woke early and drove to the county clerk's office. I wanted a certified copy of the deed in hand. Not for legal reasons, but because I liked the feel of it. Paper that says, "This is mine." I stopped at the hardware store on the way back. Bought a new deadbolt. The young man behind the counter offered to help me install it. I said no. "You sure?" he asked. "It's kind of a hassle." I smiled. So am I. Back home, I unpacked the tools and got to work. It took me longer than it should have. I scraped my knuckle and dropped a screw under the fridge. But when it clicked into place and the door locked with a solid thunk, I stood back and smiled. I'd spent a lifetime making things easier for others. Cooking, smoothing over arguments, softening my own edges to make sure no one else got cut. No more. That afternoon, Maggie called. "Hi, Grandma," she said, cheerful. "You busy?" "Not at all, sweetheart. Just changed a lock and replaced a porch bulb. Feeling very accomplished." She laughed. "You want to grab lunch Friday? I get off early." "I'd love that." We talked for a while. School, her roommate, a professor she didn't like. She always sounded most like herself when she was a little frustrated. Before we hung up, she said, "Dad's acting weird. Everything okay?" I hesitated. "You know how your father is," I said. "Yeah, that's why I'm asking." I smiled into the phone. "Everything's fine, baby. Just a little spring cleaning." She didn't believe me, but she didn't press. After we hung up, I sat at the table and ran my fingers over the copy of the deed. Let them plan. Let them guess. Let them whisper about how best to move me out of the picture. I wasn't going anywhere. Not without a fight. And certainly not without making sure they'd never try this with another woman again. The call came just after sunset. Not from Ethan, not from Samantha. From Gerald. I let it ring twice before I picked up. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Lorraine." "Gerald." His voice sounded the same. Too measured. Like he was used to everyone agreeing before he finished a sentence. "I understand Samantha stopped by." She did. I hope she was respectful. She offered to buy me out of my own life. I'd say that was quite bold. A pause. I told her it would be better if I spoke with you. And yet you didn't, he sighed. That weary, diplomatic sigh he used to use when Ethan was small, and I asked him to stop working late. The one that said, "I'm doing what I think is right, and you'll come around once you calm down." I think you misunderstood our intentions. No, Gerald, I said. I think you finally made them clear. I was just trying to help, I cut in. Yes, I've heard. Funny how your help always comes wrapped in control. He was quiet again. I wanted to offer a solution, he said. The house is old. Too much for you, really. I thought maybe if we handled things now, you could enjoy your retirement with some ease. I let out a short breath, almost a laugh. You mean the way you handled the apartment? The way you didn't realize I was trying to rent it until your wife was signing papers in the chair I was meant to sit in? He didn't answer. Gerald, I said, my voice calm. You lost the right to make decisions on my behalf the day you walked out of this house. I never walked out, he said. We agreed. No, I interrupted. I agreed. You suggested. I swallowed my pride and made peace with being left behind. But don't rewrite it now. You're being emotional, and you're being a coward. The words hung there for a moment. They sounded sharp even to me, but I didn't take them back. I see, he said finally. So there's no point in discussing the offer. There's no offer, I replied. Just an insult printed on expensive paper. He cleared his throat. Fine. Then I hope you won't mind if I move forward with the apartment rental. That's your business, I said. But keep your business away from mine. I'm trying to protect Ethan. I blinked. Protect him from what? From a mess later, from conflict, from complications. I laughed. It was low, bitter. You mean from me? He didn't deny it. I'm not a threat to Ethan, I said quietly. I'm a threat to your comfort. Lorraine, you want clean lines, easy exits. You want to build a life with a new wife and a new story. And I'm the last thing tying you to the version of yourself you've been trying to forget. He exhaled. That's not fair, isn't it? We were silent a long moment. I'd like to avoid drama, he said finally. I think we both would. That depends on you, I replied. You're not making this easy. I smiled to myself. That's new for me. He hung up first. I placed the phone down carefully. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was something else, a kind of aliveness, a current running under my skin. He wasn't used to me saying no. Not really. I had said not now, and maybe later, and I don't want to argue. But not no. Not until now. I stood up, crossed the room, and opened the window. The air was cool, sharp. October's breath. Out in the yard, the trees swayed like they'd been listening, like they were nodding in agreement. Let them watch. Let them wonder what I'd do next. Let them know I wouldn't be erased without a sound. The next morning, I baked a pie. Not out of tradition, or mood, or even appetite. Just because my hands needed something to do. I mixed the dough with more force than necessary, kneaded it like it owed me an explanation, and sliced apples as though they'd spoken out of turn. By the time Maggie arrived for lunch, the house smelled like cinnamon and old resilience. She came in smiling, cheeks pink from the wind, holding a paper bag with 2 sandwiches and a bottle of lemonade. You've been baking, she said, eyeing the pie on the cooling rack. Are we celebrating or coping? Can't it be both? She grinned. Fair. We sat at the kitchen table, sun catching the edge of her hair. There was something about Maggie, always had been, that made me feel visible. She looked people in the eye, listened without waiting for her turn to speak. Rare traits in anyone, let alone in someone raised by my son and his version of parenting. "How's school?" I asked. "Midterms," she groaned. "My brain is 60% caffeine, 30% panic, 10% crumbs." I smiled. Sounds accurate. She reached for the pie but paused. "Actually, can I ask you something first?" "Of course." "Is something going on with Dad and Grandpa?" I didn't answer right away. "Because," she continued, "they've been acting weird, whispery, like people do when they're hiding something, but think they're being subtle." I took a slow sip of lemonade. "They made me an offer on the house." Her eyebrows rose. "What kind of offer?" "To buy it." She blinked. "Wait, what?" "Gerald and Samantha," I clarified. "They want to help me simplify. Shrink my life into something that fits their comfort." "Are you serious?" "As a heart attack." She leaned back in her chair. Wow, that's low. Even for them." I didn't speak. I just watched her face, young and angry and confused. The way I had once been. The way I still was, just better at hiding it. "What did you say?" "I told them no." She nodded. "Good." Then she frowned. "Wait. Do you think this is connected to that apartment you were going to rent?" I turned to her slowly. "What do you know about that?" "I overheard Dad on the phone last week. He was telling Grandpa that he'd handled it quietly. I didn't understand what he meant. Now I did." I had always assumed Gerald acted independently, controlling, yes, but separate. Now it was clear. Ethan had known. Maybe not every detail, but enough. Enough to stay quiet while the rug was pulled from under me. "Grandma," Maggie said gently, "are you okay?" I nodded. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "You don't have to be." I looked at her, really looked. She was the only person who didn't flinch when I went quiet, who didn't fill my silence with assumptions or pity. She just sat with it. "I'm not angry," I said. "Not anymore. I'm clear." She reached across the table and took my hand. "What can I do?" "Just stay exactly who you are." She smiled, but her eyes were wet. After lunch, she helped me clean up. She insisted on washing the dishes while I dried them. We worked in a rhythm that felt older than both of us. As she left, she turned at the door. She said, "they keep underestimating you." "Let them," I replied. "I'm easier to surprise that way." And when the door closed behind her, I stood in the quiet kitchen and thought. Not about Gerald or Samantha or Ethan, but about what came next. I had more than enough time to plan. And for once, I had no interest in giving them a warning. Gerald showed up 3 days later. No warning, no call. Just like Samantha. Only this time, it was a Sunday afternoon, and I was in the garden, pruning the hydrangeas. I saw his car pull up. Still the same navy sedan he bought when we were married, just now washed by someone else. He got out slowly, as if he wasn't sure he'd be welcome. Good. He wasn't. I didn't move, just wiped my hands on my gardening apron and waited. "Lorraine," he said. I stood up. "You're early. I usually expect my uninvited guests on Thursdays." He had the decency to look sheepish. "Can we talk?" "You're already here." He hesitated, then followed me up the porch steps. I didn't ask him in. Let him feel the weight of the threshold. "I know the last conversation didn't go the way either of us wanted," he said. "It went exactly the way I wanted," I replied. He ran a hand through his graying hair. I thought maybe we could revisit the offer. You thought wrong. Lorraine, I held up a hand. Stop. You're not here to reason. You're here to negotiate, and I'm not interested. He looked out toward the yard, toward the tree we planted when Ethan was born. His voice softened. This house holds a lot of memories. Yes, I said, and I earned every one of them. He looked back at me, the mask slipping a little. I never wanted this to be a battle. But it is, I said, calm, because you don't know how to walk away without taking something. He flinched, just barely. I built a life here, Gerald. You built a narrative. That's the difference. I'm trying to make things easier. For whom? He didn't answer. The silence stretched. I offered you the house in the divorce, he said suddenly. Out of kindness. No. You offered it because you thought I wouldn't last 5 years on my own. More silence. I did last. I outlasted you. And now you want it back because you don't like the reminder that I didn't disappear. His jaw clenched. You're reading too much into this. No, I said, stepping forward. You're reading too little into me. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing there. That was fair. He didn't. He'd married a version of me who kept things together. The house, the child, the dinner table. The woman in front of him now didn't owe him anything, especially not explanation. I'm not selling, I said. Not today, not ever. And if Samantha wants to play Stepford landlord in a building she had no right to, that's between her and the mirror. He stared at me. So that's it? I nodded. That's it. You're really going to fight me on this. I'm not fighting you, I said, turning to open the screen door. I'm just not surrendering. He stepped back, off the porch. Don't let this divide the family, Lorraine. I looked at him one last time. What family? Then I went inside and shut the door. Not hard, just final. From the window, I watched him stand in the yard for a few seconds longer, like he still thought he could rewrite this moment. Then he got in his car and drove away. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands still smelling faintly of soil. There had been a time I would have cried after something like that. Now I poured myself a glass of water, drank it slowly, and made a list of everything still in my name. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do, especially when they want her gone, is stay right where she is. I didn't hear from Ethan for 5 days. And then, just as I was settling into the kind of quiet that doesn't itch, he called. Mom, he said, voice rushed. Hey, do you have a few minutes? He only called me Mom when he wanted something. The rest of the time I was Ma, or just a text bubble left unread. I'm listening, I said. He exhaled, like that was the hard part. I wanted to talk about Dad, and everything. I didn't speak. I know things have been tense, he went on. And I didn't know about the apartment stuff at first, I swear. That was Dad and Samantha. I only found out after. I still didn't speak. I should have said something. I just didn't know what to do. That's usually when people choose silence, I said. It's easier than choosing a side. He was quiet for a second. I didn't want to be in the middle. You were never in the middle, Ethan. You just stood on the side and waited for the dust to settle. Mom, I'm not angry, I said, and I wasn't. Not in the heat and fire way. It was something colder now. Cleaner. I just don't understand why you're making this so hard, he said. I blinked. Hard? It's just a house. You said before that it was too much to keep up with. You wanted to downsize. And now I want to keep it. But Dad's trying to help. No, Ethan, I said, voice calm. Your father is trying to erase the parts of his past that don't fit his new story. I happen to be one of those parts. He didn't argue. I have every right to stay here. I'm not in debt. I'm not struggling. I don't owe either of you anything. I didn't say you did, but you act like I do, I snapped. You call when something doesn't go your way. You don't check on me. You don't ask what I need. And now, when your father's plans fall apart, I'm suddenly important again. I could hear him breathing, steady and shallow. I'm tired, Ethan, I said. But not of the house. I'm tired of being treated like a burden wearing lipstick. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I didn't know you felt that way. You didn't want to know. A pause. What do you want me to do? I laughed, short and humorless. You still think there's a solution to manage. There isn't. I want to fix this, he said. Then start by looking at your wife and your father and asking why they're so threatened by a woman who waters her own garden. I hung up after that. Not because I was angry, because I was done. Later that day, Ruth called. The liens filed, she said. Quiet, but solid. They can't move anything without your signature. Good, I said. What's next? Trust paperwork's in progress. Deed review complete. I'd recommend we finish your updated will this week. I agree. You're steady, she said. That makes them nervous. Good. That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and reread the old letter my mother once sent me. A birthday card, years ago, with one sentence underlined 3 times. Never let them confuse your silence for weakness. I tucked the card back into its envelope and smiled. Let Gerald plan. Let Ethan stall. Let Samantha tighten her grip. They didn't know the half of what I'd prepared, and they never would, until it was too late. Maggie showed up unannounced the next afternoon. She knocked, then let herself in like she always used to when she was younger. Back when she came over after school, tossing her backpack by the stairs and asking what smelled good. Grandma, she called from the hall. You home? I'm in the kitchen, I said. She came in holding a brown paper bag, cheeks red from the cold, hair pulled into a loose braid. Olive bread, she said. From that little place on Ash Street you like. You didn't have to— I know, she interrupted, setting the bag down. That's why I did. I smiled, tired around the edges. Tea? Always. We moved around each other in that old dance. Kettle on, mugs out, sugar for her, honey for me. She sat down at the table, tucking her legs under herself the way she did when she was a teenager. They're getting desperate, she said, no preamble. I raised an eyebrow. Dad and Grandpa. Something's shifted. I can feel it. Samantha's been texting me, which she never does unless she wants something. And Dad keeps calling just to check in, like he's hoping I'll accidentally mention something useful. Have you? No, she said. But I've hinted that you're meeting with a lawyer. I thought it might rattle them. I looked at her, really looked. She didn't flinch. You're not responsible for managing them, I said gently. I know, she replied. But I'm tired of watching them pretend they're doing this for your sake. I sipped my tea. They've been rewriting the story for years. This is just the last chapter they thought they could control. She nodded slowly. I've been thinking, she said, about what happens after all this, when the trust is finalized, when the house is safe. What about it? I want to help you fix it up. The porch, the windows, maybe even the upstairs bedroom. Make it into something new. You don't have time for all that, I said. I'll make time." She looked at me then with a quiet urgency, like she wasn't just offering to repaint a wall, but to rebuild something between us. Something they'd all tried to erode. "You'd do all that?" She smiled. "I'm not trying to save you, Grandma. I just want to be where things are real." We finished our tea in silence, the kind that only exists between two people who know too much and love each other anyway. After she left, I walked through the house slowly, room by room. I opened the door to the upstairs bedroom, the one I hadn't touched in years. Dust floated in the slanted light. The wallpaper had curled near the windows, and the floor creaked with the hesitation of old wood. But it was still mine. All of it. I imagined Maggie in here, scraping paint, laughing, playing music too loud. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something settle in me. Not vengeance, not even victory. Just direction. Downstairs, I sat at my desk and pulled out the folder Ruth had given me. Trust documents, will drafts, title protections. At the bottom was a space for a letter. Ruth had called it a statement of intent. Not legally binding, just personal. I pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write. "Maggie, if you're reading this someday, it means the paperwork's done and the house is yours. Not just the wooden windows, but the history too. Don't let it burden you. Let it remind you that a woman can hold her ground without shouting, that she can love without disappearing, that her voice matters, even when no one's listening. You are the best part of my story, not because you stayed, but because you saw me when others looked away. Keep the hydrangeas trimmed, fix the screen door, and never, ever let anyone talk you out of your space. Love always, Grandma." I folded the letter and placed it in the envelope marked Final. Then I went outside, stood on the porch Maggie would help repair, and looked out over the quiet street. They were all still moving their pieces on the board. But the game they were playing? I'd already rewritten the rules. The envelope arrived 2 days later, thick, white, and embossed. No return address. Just my name in that familiar, impersonal font, Lawyer's Love. Like even the paper is trying to stay neutral. I knew what it was before I opened it. A formal letter from Gerald's attorney. I sat at the kitchen table, the one with the worn edge and the tea rings I never bothered to scrub off. I used the same letter opener I'd had since our wedding. A gift from his mother, of all people. Inside, a letter folded too neatly. Legal language dressed up like politeness. He was formally requesting a mediation regarding the ownership and estate status of the house. He wanted clarity. He wanted cooperation. He wanted to keep pretending this was about logistics and not control. I read it twice. Then I laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. I called Ruth. She picked up on the first ring. "Let me guess," she said. "They went formal. Envelope just arrived." "Good. Now they've moved from whispering behind your back to putting it on paper. That's progress." "Will we need to respond?" "Oh, we will," she said. "But not with fear, with precision." She asked me to send over a scan. I did. While the printer hummed, I stared at the envelope again. How clean it looked, how white, like it didn't know the weight of what it carried. That evening, I sat on the porch and watched the neighborhood go dim. Lights flicked on, one by one. A man across the street dragged his trash bin to the curb. 2 teenagers biked by, laughing. Life, steady and unaware. And then, headlights. Gerald's car. I stayed seated. He parked, got out slowly, and approached the porch with a hesitance I hadn't seen in him since the night he told me he needed space. That was the polite way he framed leaving. Space, as if I'd been the one pressing in. He stopped at the steps. "I assume you got the letter?" he said. I did. He looked tired. Not old, just worn, like the role he was playing didn't fit right anymore. I didn't want to do it this way. "You mean legally?" I asked, "instead of quietly pressuring me through our son and your wife?" He winced. "That's not what this is." "No," I said. "This is what happens when you run out of soft threats." He ran a hand through his hair. "We could settle this peacefully." "We could," I said, "but then you'd win." His voice sharpened. "This isn't about winning, isn't it?" I stood now, slow and calm. "You tried to move me out of my own future. You placed your wife in my next chapter without even asking if I was done writing. You thought I'd shrink, retire, fade out like polite women are supposed to." He looked at me, really looked. "I don't want to fight with you, Lorraine. You don't get to fight me. You lost that privilege when you walked out and thought the rest of my life was still yours to arrange." We stood in silence. Then he said something small, something pathetic. "I just wanted everything to be clean." I nodded. "You always did hate a mess. That's why you left when things got hard. That's why you picked someone who smiles more than she asks questions." He flinched again. I stepped down one stair, closer. "But life isn't clean, Gerald. It's full of broken tiles and cracked corners. And I've spent too long sweeping up after other people." He didn't reply. Just looked away, then back again. "You're serious about this?" "I am." "You're really going to fight?" "No," I said. "I'm going to stay, and that's worse for you." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once, the way people do when they know they've lost something, but haven't figured out what yet. Then he walked back to his car, and I stood on my porch as the taillights disappeared, thinking how strange it was that power could feel so quiet, so steady. I didn't need to yell. I just needed to stay standing. The day of the mediation came, but I didn't go. That was Ruth's idea. "You've already stated your position," she said. "Let him be the one to explain why he's wasting everyone's time." She went in my place. Crisp navy suit, sharp glasses, and a folder so thick it made Gerald's attorney look underprepared before he even sat down. She called me afterward. "His lawyer tried to open with a tone of cooperation," she said, amused. "Gerald looked like he expected you to cave just by the suggestion of inconvenience. And when I didn't? He didn't speak much after that." I smiled. He's not used to silence working against him. They've officially withdrawn the offer and the pressure. "Good," I said. "Let them stew in the quiet." That night, I made dinner. Real dinner. Chicken roasted with lemon, potatoes with rosemary, and sautéed green beans the way Maggie likes them, blistered, not boiled. She came by just after 6. "Celebrating?" she asked, pulling off her coat. "I suppose I am." We ate by the window, candle lit, soft music playing. The kind of night I used to wait for, except this one didn't depend on anyone else showing up. "They're not backing down completely," I said. "But the threats lost its teeth." Maggie nodded. "Dad won't talk about it. He just keeps saying it's complicated, like you're a math problem. He doesn't know how to deal with a version of me that doesn't apologize for existing." She pushed her plate away and looked at me. "Can I tell you something without it sounding like a betrayal?" "Always." "I think they thought you'd give up because you didn't yell, because you didn't fight the way people expect." I nodded. Silence scares people more than shouting. It leaves them alone with themselves. She smiled. You've always been louder when you're quiet. We washed dishes together, the way we always do. Shoulder to shoulder, the rhythm of clinking and water filling the silence. Then, as she dried her hands, she asked, "Do you ever wish things had turned out different?" I thought for a long moment. "No," I said finally. "Because if they had, I might still be waiting for permission to live." The next morning, I went to the notary's office, signed the final version of my will, signed the trust, signed the house, all to Maggie. "Effective immediately?" the clerk asked. "Yes," I said, "but with life tenancy." "I stay until I don't." She nodded, stamped, filed. Done. Later, Ruth called. "They'll find out," she said. "Might take them a week or a month, but it'll get to them." "I know." "You ready for that?" I smiled. I've never been more ready. I didn't need them to know right away. I didn't need them to rage or beg or manipulate. Let the silence carry it to them slowly. Let the realization creep in like cold air under a locked door. The woman they thought they'd outmaneuvered? She wasn't playing the game anymore. She was rewriting the ending. They found out the following Thursday. I know because Ethan called that evening. Late. His voice was tight, brittle around the edges. "You changed the deed." I was sitting in the living room, legs tucked under a blanket, tea untouched beside me. The air outside smelled like burnt leaves, the kind of scent that makes you feel like something has ended, even if you don't know what. "I did," I said calmly. "To Maggie?" "Yes." "You didn't think to tell me?" "No," I said. "I didn't." He let out a short breath, the kind that's supposed to sound disappointed but lands more like wounded pride. "She's 21. She's capable. She's a student. She's a woman who sees me." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You don't think that's extreme? You mean permanent?" "Yes, that's the point." He didn't answer right away. Then, "Dad's furious." "I'm sure he is. He says you blindsided him." I almost laughed. "He tried to buy me out of my own home behind my back. That's not a blindside. That's a betrayal with a bow on it." Another pause. "And what do you want from me now?" he asked, the edge back in his voice. "Nothing," I said. "I never did." "That's not fair." "No," I said. What's not fair is raising a son who forgets the difference between inheritance and entitlement. That one hit. I could feel it through the silence. "You think I don't care about you?" he asked quietly. "I think you care more about managing me than hearing me. And I'm not something to manage, Ethan. I'm not an estate to prepare or a problem to prevent. I'm your mother, not your responsibility, and not your obstacle." He didn't answer. He just hung up. I stared at the dark screen for a long moment, then turned the phone face down. Later, Maggie texted. Just one line. "I'm proud of you." No emojis, no punctuation, just the truth. Plain and full. That night, I sat at the dining table and wrote a list. Not of tasks or errands or loose ends. Just a list of what I still had. Not what I owned. What I had. The difference mattered now. A house that is no longer a battlefield. A granddaughter who listens. A garden that needs mending but still blooms. A lawyer who doesn't flinch. A name that still belongs to me. I folded the list and tucked it into the back of the kitchen drawer, behind the loose batteries and the old tape measure. I didn't need anyone to find it. I just needed to write it. The next morning, I opened the windows, let in the cold air. Made real coffee, not instant. Played the old jazz records I hadn't touched in years, not for nostalgia, but because the house sounded different now. Lighter, not empty. Just mine. I didn't know what Gerald would do next. Maybe nothing. Maybe some new angle. But I wasn't bracing anymore. I'd already outlived his worst intentions. That was the part none of them understood. They thought I was resisting change. But I was the change. And now, for the first time in a long time, there was nothing left to defend. Only a future left to live. They thought I'd go quietly. That's the part I keep circling back to. Not the betrayal, not the manipulation, not even the arrogance. Just the assumption that I'd fold myself small, politely, like a napkin they were done using. And the worst part? For years I let them think that. Because quiet women make people comfortable. Because silence keeps the peace, or so I believed. Until I realized the only peace they wanted was one where I didn't speak. Well, now they've heard me. The trust is sealed. The deed is final. The house, my house, is protected by more than walls. It's protected by the truth of who I am now, and by the woman who will come after me and never question whether she belongs. Maggie came by yesterday with paint samples. She wants to do the front door in a deep blue. Something bold, she said, but still calm, like you. We scraped old wood in the sun, our sleeves rolled up, our hands stained with primer. I showed her how to tape a clean line, how to keep the brush wet. She told me about a paper she's writing, something about intergenerational silence. I didn't say anything, just kept brushing paint into the grooves. She doesn't know it yet, but she's painting more than a door. She's reclaiming an entrance. Later, she read aloud the letter I'd written her, the one tucked into the trust paperwork. She cried. I didn't. I've cried enough in this house for both of us. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not wondering if they'll ever understand why I stayed. Some things don't need to be understood to be true. When they asked me, years ago, why I didn't leave the house after the divorce, I used to say something vague. It was easier, or too much hassle, or I just never got around to it. Now I know the truth. I didn't leave because I wasn't done yet. And now, with everything in its place, the documents, the repairs, the granddaughter with paint on her cheek and purpose in her spine, I finally am. So if you're reading this, and you've been quiet too long, if you've made yourself small in rooms where you once built the walls, let me say this. You don't need to burn everything down to start again. Sometimes all it takes is refusing to move. Sometimes the quietest thing you can do is stay exactly where they hoped you wouldn't. And if this story made something in you sit up and pay attention, then follow. Share it. Tell someone. Because there's a woman out there right now packing up her worth into boxes she didn't ask for. And maybe she needs to hear that staying is also a kind of power.